Am I too far? I'm too far, huh? Yeah. Better. Sorry about my hair. Hello, studious minds. Welcome back to Pagan Philosophy. First off, forgive my absence. I know it's been a while. I've been busy. I've been busy chilling hard. A lot is on my mind right now. I talk to myself way too much, and I thought, why don't I talk to you guys instead of talking to myself? I want to make this video on like polytheism versus monotheism because I think that they're both kind of legitimate in their own way. I think it's interesting when we're talking about God. I also had this tendency to want to differentiate between the gods and like the God. I almost don't even like using the same word, God, to describe them both because we're not really talking about the same thing. Gods to me are idealizations. We can glimpse into the ideal, right? So we have like perfect circle, right? The idea of the perfect circle. It doesn't really exist. You can't really draw the perfect circle. You can't draw a point, you know? A little dot is not a point. A point is that which has no dimension. And if a circle is the collection of all points equidistant from one certain point, then we can't really draw that. That doesn't really exist around us. We can't really point to that. And so what do we look at when we look at the perfect circle? What are we talking about? Well, we're talking about an abstraction, right? Something that is abstract means that it is outside of space and time. It doesn't exist physically. It's an idea. But the big question is, are these ideas objectively existing, or are they a result of human experience? Well, in my mind, regardless, they are idealizations. And so if we as humans, as a result of our reasoning and as a result of our intellect, can glimpse into the ideal, I think that's something to set aside. I think that's something to honor. I think that it would be virtuous of us to put that aside as something to strive for. And so it goes a step further when we start to talk about other idealizations like wisdom. Well, what is wisdom? Is anybody perfectly wise? Will that ever actually exist? No, but wisdom to me is Athena, right? The Romans called her Minerva. And even though there is no perfect human who is perfectly wise, any human efforts at attempting to be wise will always fall short of Athena. It will always fall short of this ideal form of wisdom that we can set aside. But the big question is, does perfect wisdom exist apart from us? Does this objectively exist, or is it a human experience to idealize and to talk about the wisdom, which doesn't actually manifest in any way? Regardless, I think it's worth, I don't know, worshiping, or at least honoring, revering, putting aside as something greater than the manner in which we do behave and we do attempt to be wise. And so that's kind of what I mean when I'm talking about the gods. I'm talking about things like the wisdom. I'm talking about things like the temperance. I'm talking about things like the justice, the beauty, right? That all other forms of beauty kind of fall short of. It may not objectively exist, and we may never know as limited human beings whether it objectively exists or doesn't. But we have these glimpses into the perfect circle. We know its properties. We know how to determine its area. We know what it consists of, or at least we kind of understand. And so how does this relate to the gods? Like I said, they're kind of like gods in my mind, each of them. They're idealizations. They're perfect principles. They're the ideal concepts. And so when we're talking about that, and we're talking about like the God, theos, like the one, I think you start to go a step further into something else. And that's why I don't like to use the word the gods and then the God to describe the same thing, because I feel like we're talking about two very different things. What is God? Is God one or many? Well, the gods, I think for sure, are many. There are many principles, many concepts. There's beauty, love, all these different things. Although Diotima argued that love is not actually a god. But which is more valid? Which is more legitimate? Monotheism or polytheism? Well, I think it's interesting when you break it down to the idea of unity and multiplicity. Is the world not one? Does the world not exist of one world? Is it not one world? Yes, of course it is. I don't think many people would argue that Earth is actually three Earths, that there's just the Earth that we live on. But does the Earth not consist of parts? Is the Earth not also a biosphere an atmosphere. Well, we say the biosphere. Doesn't the biosphere also consist of the human element of the biosphere? Doesn't the human species, which is one human species, does it not also consist of 7 and such billion participants? Well, are those individuals not also, one individual can be broken down into its body, its mind, its organ system? Can the organ system not be broken down further into intestines and hearts? And you can keep going until you get to like a subatomic level, right? And so the earth is one earth, but yet consists of many parts, right? So is it objectively one or objectively many? Or are these just principles and concepts, again, like I said, human categorizations that we put on it? Our way of understanding what's there. Well, what exists, one or many? Can we not say the universe? Is that not a legitimate, valid way of interpreting things? But is it not many in its parts? Is it not many in its aspects and its qualities? And so it sounds like when you're talking about the God, you're talking about breaking down so much until you can't break down anymore and you get to that perfect singularity, right? It's like, well, we think that there's perfect singularity like in the center of a black hole, right? Or we think that there's perfect singularity before the Big Bang happened. So that's what we talk about when we're talking about the God. Is that what you mean by the God? Well, at that point, it ceases to be a God, in my opinion. It ceases to consist of aspects and behavior and action. And so which is more viable to us as an intellectual species? Is it the gods or that one, the one, right? The Neoplatonists called it the one, the singularity before all else that all other gods manifest from. Which is more valid for us to interpret? Should we focus on the idealizations, the gods as we understand them, wisdom, temperance, or should we focus on this one beyond all else, the perfect, the most valid, that cannot be broken down further? Well, at that point, it ceases to be valid, because if you're talking about the one, the perfect beyond all else, and you say the gods, that's already invalid, because there cannot be many perfect one beyond all else. And so maybe the words are flawed. Maybe the words need to be switched up, you know? Maybe we shouldn't use the same word God to describe the gods and to describe the one beyond all else. Well, that's all for this video. Sorry about my absence again. I've been, working on some stuff. I just wanted to fill you guys in on my current musings. Muses, the muses are also gods. Look them up. There's 9 of them. And I'll be back with some more stuff, hopefully. But until next time, friends, stay studious.